All right, guys, we are back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk about this whole Matthew Stafford situation and where it stands at right now. Because obviously, we haven't been here for a couple of days, so a lot has transpired. I think last we talked about this situation. I'm pretty sure the Rams, from what I remember and what we discussed, they wanted to know where Stafford stood on potentially playing at all this season and whether or not he was thinking about retiring. They wanted an answer sooner or quicker, I should say, than what they got last year. And they got that. It was pretty early on in the process where we knew that Stafford was going to play. That wasn't a question. But now it just all had to do with the Rams and how they could accommodate the contract and potentially keeping Stafford, or, worst case scenario, in my opinion, would be a world where he does end up moving on and he becomes the starting quarterback of another team, right? That's what I think the worst case scenario would be, in my opinion. But, we are talking about a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford, and with his contract, I think being probably the most important part of this whole situation. Really, the deal with his contract is that he has $4 million guaranteed on it, and right when you're more of a veteran player, right, a 37-year-old quarterback, $4 million for playing this sport is obviously not going to cut it. So I'm sure the negotiations are going to go along that path of discussing that. How do they accommodate Matthew Stafford with some more guarantees, for the huge asset he is obviously to their team. He deserves more. He should be getting more. And also the fact that he is due to make $27 million in 2025. For the quarterbacks that are making more than that, the amount of quarterbacks that are making more of that, all of them are not better than Matthew Stafford, right? So I'm sure he's looking at that and thinking that for how much he's helped out this team, really building it to what it is right now, him along with Sean McVay in the front office, and he's played a huge part in it, right? They traded for him, and the year that he came in, they won the Super Bowl. So I'm sure he is feeling that he is deserving of more of just a better compensation, right? Obviously, he's deserved that, and I don't think he's wrong for thinking that, and I don't think it's wrong for him to kind of play hardball in that aspect, right? So that's kind of, I think, where this whole situation kind of lies right now, right? Just that this weird gray area where both sides are trying to figure out a middle ground where everybody's happy. And in that process, right, we got the latest, major development on Saturday where the NFL Network's Tom Pelissero reported that the Rams had given permission to Matthew Stafford's agent to speak with other teams during this process, right? The idea behind that is to kind of gauge a value of where Matthew Stafford lies right now in the market, right? To see what it would take to renegotiate with him, what the market price seems to be for him, having his agent go out there, speak with different teams, and come back, I guess, with a median sort of average, or just an average, right, of what it would take to re-sign him, right? See what other teams are willing to pay for him, come back, and then see what, that number is. And if you can accommodate that, I'm sure the Rams would be happy to do that. If not, there are some hesitations from the Rams, that investing maybe too much in a 37-year-old quarterback is not something that they're particularly eager to do, right? And it is all speculation right now. It is all inclinations for that part of it. But, you kind of see it in a way where, I'm trying to read both sides, right? And the Rams, paying, let's say they pay Matthew Stafford is it crazy to say that they're going to pay him 50? Like, that's the number I've seen a couple times. And I don't know, because like 50 million, you see me how I'm talking right now, right? I'm having some hesitations and second thoughts about paying Matthew Stafford $50 million. And I'm not saying he's sitting there with his arms crossed, not willing to negotiate anything other than 50 million, right? I'm sure he's open to whatever, right? To see what best accommodates him and his family, obviously, and the team, right? But I don't know. It feels like he is going to get a pay raise wherever he ends up, right? I think that's going to be fair for him. But the numbers that are being thrown out there, kind of meeting that market price, depending on what other teams are willing to pay for him, is a bit tricky for me, right? Is he worth $50 million? if you look at the other quarterbacks making that money, I would say yes, right? Because you look at guys like Tua, Trevor, Dak. Nobody's going to admit it, but if those teams had the opportunity to trade their quarterbacks for Matthew Stafford, they would probably do so. So when you compare him to other players making $50 million, you should say, of course, Matthew Stafford should be making that much money. But I think the context of the team and how it is built up right now, that's obviously a huge thing. Because if you're looking at the Rams, right, and I know the cap space is going up a bunch, right? It just jumped up to, I forget what it was this year, but it grew a lot more this year compared to last year where it also jumped, but this year jumped up even more. So I acknowledge that aspect of it, right? But also with the Rams, right, they're in a good spot right now, I feel like, where they've hit on a lot of their young players. They got a good, solid, young core of players that really made a huge impact last season, right? You saw how close they came to beating the Eagles. But they want to continue to build on that, right, obviously, and they don't have endless amounts of money, right? So you got to balance that, your young core, who obviously you're going to have to pay eventually, and trying to also get better, right? Because you want to get better and get over the hump and eventually beat the Eagles, right? Because you were the closest team to doing so. You want to get over that hump and not only get better, but you got to manage trying to pay Matthew, right? They're already moving on from Cooper Kupp because they probably realized that it wasn't going to fit with what they wanted to do. So I'm sure they want to bring in other guys to help them shore up that run defense, right? Because it was pretty bad against the Rams, right? So they want to do that as well as trying to keep Stafford and give this one last go at it, I'm sure. But it is tricky when you're talking about Stafford and how much money he should be making and how much, you get an idea when the agent comes back and, you get a gauge of the market price and everything like that. But I'm sure, when this thing kind of develops even more, I'm sure once we get into the combine, right, we're probably by like Wednesday or Thursday, I'm sure we're going to hear some more things, right, when everybody gets together in Indianapolis. You got agents talking to agents, representatives from teams talking to agents and stuff like that. So we're going to get more information, I'm sure, throughout this week. But, if Matthew Stafford's out there, you're not going to have little teams, kind of knocking at your door. There's going to be a lot of teams interested. And from what I've seen, there was a report from Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer that reported that the Steelers, the Raiders, the Browns, and the Giants have shown some interest in Matthew Stafford, among others that were unnamed have as well. But you take the teams that are interested, and then you look at a big picture here a little bit with the quarterback market, right? And it's not the best year to be needing a quarterback, right? Because, you got Matthew Stafford, potentially, if he's available, probably being at the top of that list. But Sam Darnold, he had a great year, but the way it ended, people probably feel some sort of way about that. There are some doubts there. And, you have Aaron Rodgers, historically fantastic, tremendous talent sort of player, right? But recently it hasn't gone so well. The injuries and the performances, you got some doubts there as well. And then it kind of drops off when you're talking about like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr potentially out there. Not the best year where you need a quarterback. So with that being the case, if this becomes a legitimate thing, going forward, right? If the Rams really feel like, because they got to take this into account, right? Like, the money is obviously a huge portion of it. I have my doubts about it as well. But when you look out there, the question you got to ask yourself is, are you willing to part ways with Stafford for that money and really not have a very solid quarterback option afterwards, right? Because if you move on from him because, the money just doesn't add up, like, who's going to be your quarterback, right? Even if it's not Jimmy Garoppolo, are you going to find somebody out there that's better than Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, definitively? Probably not. So that's, I think, also another thing that makes this a difficult call, right? If I'm the Rams, I probably would cave a little bit. I don't think I'm going over 50. 50 would be really pushing it. And again, I'm not sure if Stafford is sitting there pounding the table for 50. I doubt it. But like 50 would be the capper. Like, I don't think I would really want to go to 50. But if there was no coming back, if if my hand is on the red button and if I press it, we're signing Matthew Stafford, but if not, he leaves and goes out the door and I have to have a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo or like Sam Darnold or something like that, I'm probably going to push the red button if it all comes down to it. That's just me. But, I'm not thinking and I'm not in there, obviously. So it is a tough decision to call. There's a lot of factors out there. And, the quarterback class this year, we just finished talking about it, isn't one that everyone's excited about either. So the options outside of Matthew Stafford, I think probably will end up with this story just having the Rams extend him or just giving him what he wants, as I just kind of alluded to. But it is tricky, right? It's not just as simple as, he's here, he wants this, all right, let's just give it to him. The Rams are trying to think long term, and I think for people that are maybe thinking like, why is this taking so long? Why are they giving him time to, to even speak to other teams? I think it's just a little bit more complicated, right? But when you simplify it to just, all right, who's going to be your other quarterback, it gets a little bit easier. But, you never know. There's a lot of things that these organizations really think about, right? Nobody thought that Luka would get traded, right? But here we are with Luka on the Lakers, right? You just never know, right? Crazier things have clearly happened. So I wouldn't be surprised. But if I was a betting man, I would say he would stay on the Rams. I think it would be hard to move on from him for that major reason that the quarterbacks outside of him, you'd be taking a pretty big step backwards. So I think that's the simplest way to put it. But with that, we're going to move on to another quarterback here, Aaron Rodgers. What is his future looking like? He's not going to be on the Jets, so we don't have to really worry about that. But where could he fit in? What could be the level of interest in Aaron Rodgers? And, what factors did he kind of give out as to what he's looking for in a new team? We're going to reveal all of that when we return right after this.
Looking